Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with your daily World War Z update. My friends, things keep getting weirder and weirder as we approach the 0 hour. The latest in a string of victims of what they're calling climate dysregulation is the Chinese. 100 million people are currently experiencing rolling blackouts. They're having to restrict factory output, so they're not able to make all these fancy electronics that we love to consume over here. It's causing crop failure for hundreds of thousands of acres of crops. It's causing the rivers to dry up, so they can't power the dams and the hydroelectric facilities, and is just creating chaos because China is currently experiencing the worst heat wave on record, the most sustained heat wave on record, and one of the worst droughts on record. And that, of course, if you have been paying attention to the weather news, you would know that China has had its share of floods. So the more droughts, the more corresponding floods we're going to see, the more pestilence we're going to see. In fact, you're going to see those things in that order. You're going to see droughts, then you're going to see flash floods, then you're going to see the plague of the locusts that come afterwards. I think that actually happened in Australia, where you had that record wildfire season, then you had record floods, then you had the mice infestation. I'm not sure if it happened in that exact order, but this is how these things play out. And it only gets worse and worse because the more people need to regulate their microclimates with air conditioning, the hotter it's going to get, because air conditioners are actually effectively heaters. They just move the heat outside into the macroclimate whilst cooling the microclimate. But on the whole, they're actually causing the acceleration of the heating to occur. It creates the urban heat island effect, where it's just, it's hotter in the cities because, like I say, all the colors, the metals, the fact that we're all pumping these air conditioners trying to stay cool. And so it's just a vicious positive reinforcing feedback loop, which is going to increase the cost of energy, increase the price of food, cause these rolling blackouts that contribute to the shutdown of various factories. That leads to unemployment. It's just a gong show, okay? And so the Yangtze River now joins all the other rivers that are drying up around the world. Columbia River, the Thames River, the Danube River, the Rhine River, the Colorado River, that they're now aggressively restricting use of in an attempt to salvage it, because you got to power Las Vegas, you got to power those casinos, right? So it's not just about the inability to irrigate crops and stay hydrated and not die. It's also about the electricity needed to power all of the pumps that go into all those things. So it's just a big system, and it's all interconnected. That's why I talk about things happening in Russia and Ukraine and China, because it's all interconnected, guys. If you can't see that yet, then you're not paying enough attention. This is going to cause the price of food to skyrocket beyond what it has already. The price of food is going to continue to go up. Like, from this point forward, food is going to be one of the most sought after commodities. And the more it is sought after, the higher the price goes, because the more countries are going to start wanting to hoard it more and more. All these net importing countries, have their grain silos at record levels right now because they're worried about the future. They see the price of fertilizer that has tripled, if not quadrupled in some places. They see the price of natural gas, which is essential in the agricultural process. They see pesticides, herbicides, all the price of all these inputs into the system increasing drastically, going parabolic. Okay, they see the irrigation, the aquifers that are drying up, the rivers that are drying up, the glaciers that are melting, and all of this climate dysregulation, as they're calling it, which is making it harder and harder to grow food, not counting all the global supply chain issues, the manufacturing issues, the geopolitical issues, the war, the conflict, the plagues, you name it. It's all contributing to food prices going anywhere but down. So if I had to put money somewhere, I'd be putting money in food right now, because that's really the only safe place. Technology is not going to be able to offset most of the gains of the green revolution, have been made and have been pushed to the limit as is. And, even the fertilizer, you just say, well, if we have energy, if you have abundant energy, you can do anything. You can, move fertilizer from one place to another. You can grow copious amounts of food so long as you have the energy and the fertilizer to do so. But if the price of the energy is too sky high, the price of the fertilizer is too sky high, or the fertilizer is toxic to the environment because, you know, it's contributing to like 100 times the greenhouse effect, or whatever you want to call it, and all this stuff goes into the waterways and contaminates the waterways, that's probably making us sterile. So is it really, you know, keeping us, is it, if it's about survival, then if we're making ourselves sterile and infertile as a result of all these chemicals that we're using to grow more food, to just throw it in the garbage and waste it. So it's just it's a crazy system right now. And the price of food is only going to continue to skyrocket. This inflation, this disinflation that they're talking about having happened in the past couple of months is mostly due to the reduction in gas prices, which are only relatively lower than they were, you know, the months before when they went parabolic. So, you know, gas prices, people say, well, gas is down, but it's really not down. It's way up from what it was just 6 months ago. And in fact, it's now ticking back up in some places. And as winter approaches, it's only going to get worse, because we're seeing the Russia-Europe decoupling happening. Russia and China are now doing military exercises. You got the banks now allowing people to divest from their Russian assets because they see the writing on the wall. They see what's coming. Anyways, this Yangtze River situation in China is very concerning because, you know, China is like the Achilles heel of the planet, especially when it comes to the supply chain. So if they cannot produce, ironically, in these factories that are affected, they produce solar panels and lithium-ion batteries. I mean, they're producing the so-called green technology with this energy, and now they can't do that. I think to the tune of like 12,000 tons of lithium is now not going to be processed. And, you know, these portable home generators are all the rage now, right? 12,000 tons is a lot of lithium. Now, that's not, you might think, well, yeah, look, how much lithium weighs a lot. But a lot of that is nickel in the battery. The actual amount of lithium is only 1 to 5% in the actual, the weight. You know, that's why Teslas weigh so much, because the batteries are so heavy. But a lot of that is not lithium. So 12,000 tons is a whole lot of battery. And that's just from this one set of restrictions placed on this one productive region. All right, now here's what they're trying to do, and I know a lot of the tinfoil crowd is going to get a kick out of this one. They've been trying to do this. They've been doing this for a long time, since the 40s. They're doing cloud seeding. It's also called geoengineering or weather modification. They're injecting these silver iodide rods into clouds, if they can find any, and that's the problem, they can't, in order to stimulate rainfall. Okay, these silver iodide rods are typically the size of cigarettes and are shot into existing clouds to help form ice crystals. The ice crystals then help the cloud produce more rain, making its moisture content heavier and more likely to be released. So this is what they're trying to do to bring rainfall back to the crucial Yangtze River, along which sits many dams and hydroelectric facilities, as China grasps one of the worst heat waves on record, the worst heat wave in recorded history, the most sustained and one of the driest conditions. And like I said, drought is going to be followed by flash flooding and plague or pestilence, whatever biblical thing, you know, the deluge, the ark, the plague, it's all coming. It's all coming down the pike. So as we approach 0 hour, just make sure you are strategically relocated accordingly. Speaking of which, the actual creator of that app that I talked about messaged me, and I got to get back to him. And actually, I had a couple people reach out to me. I have to follow up on that to create the strategic relocation app that we're talking about. So hopefully we can put something together that will be useful for people, because this situation is only going to get worse. I cannot emphasize enough how screwed the global food supply is going to be in the coming years ahead. And that's if everything stays the same, and that's if we don't go to war with China, and that's if the Russian and Ukraine war settles down and cools down. It is still, just as a result of this climate dysregulation, the food supply is screwed. So the prices are only going to continue to skyrocket. Now get this, switching gears here. Zelensky has revealed why he didn't warn his citizens of the Russian invasion. This is from Newsweek. Now, we talked about this months ago. We talked about how countries will use the noble lie because they know better than us. And, just like how the Fed said there wasn't going to be any inflation, and, inflation is going to be transitory and it's not going to be that bad. And sure enough, we're now seeing record inflation in a lot of different sectors of the market. In the same way, they told people, don't worry, the Russians aren't going to invade. You don't have to pack your belongings. And we promise we won't conscript you and force you at gunpoint to go and force somebody else at gunpoint. But, of course, that's what happened. Now, Zelensky has said that in an attempt to prevent a financial panic that would have resulted of his country, would result in his country swiftly falling to the Kremlin if he told people that the Russians were going to invade. Now, I can understand this on the one hand. I've worked in management before. Okay, I get it. You're at the top of the pyramid, and all the peasants are, just doing their thing. They're functioning as they should. If you were to throw some kind of curveball and put the spook in them, then that's when the panic ensues, and the civilization can rapidly unravel. But as a prepper, I still want to know these things. And this is why alternative news is so important. Because we were saying from the get-go that, no, this is going to happen, right? We were talking about inflation last year. We were talking about how the invasion was going to happen and all the rest. So, at least us, the small minority of people who watch these types of videos and make ourselves aware, are aware of what leaders are going to do in order to put the greater good, as they call it, the noble lie, ahead of our own individual interests. So he goes on here, heavily dependent on Western military aid, Zelensky sought to maintain relations with the U.S. while also criticizing America's warnings of a Russian incursion as an exaggeration. He says, get this, he explained that telling Ukrainian people to store food and money in preparation for war would have paradoxically meant a swift victory for the Russians. So think about that magnified. And if you don't think this is going to be the same playbook employed here when the whole thing collapses, then you are sadly mistaken. Don't store food and money, because that would have meant a swift victory for Russia. I mean, you could replace Russia with whatever you want. Whatever impending disaster looms overhead, they're not going to tell you because they're worried about, the continuity of government, essentially. Right? Now, you could make the argument, like I said, that the net gain for the population as a whole is better to not incite a panic, but I, for one, am going to keep my eyes open. And I'll just conclude with this part. This is from Newsweek. This is bona fide, Western media, fact checkers, right? I don't have time for reasoning, he says, warnings, commitments. I just have a task to do, he said. I must not allow them to occupy our land, and I have to pay people who die. That's exactly what it sounds like. There are no sentiments. You have to do this every month. And he's talking about ensuring this pipeline of funds coming from Western countries. 5 to 7 billion a month. He needed the money to spend on military salaries, and he wouldn't be able to get that money if he did not alert his population to the fact that the Russians were going to invade. Anyways, just one of those things. All the more reasons why we need to be just ahead of the curve when it comes to these things. I mean, you could be somebody. I mean, if you were to poll people, would you rather know or not know? I'm pretty sure 95% of people would want to know. There'd be a very small segment of the population who would take one for the team and say, yeah, I wouldn't want to know that, a disaster was going to come. So I guess this kind of works to our benefit as preppers, because as we're trying to see the matrix for what it is, we have an opportunity to get ahead of the panic, because the panic ultimately does come, like it came in Kiev when everybody was trying to bail that day and the roadways were clogged. Zelensky's aide has threatened Europe's longest bridge extending from Crimea. So this is the gateway to Crimea, which is being used by the Russians for military purposes, although there is a lot of civilian traffic on it. They've threatened to blow this up. The Russians said, if you touch that bridge, that's it. It's time to start shooting the nukes. Well, they didn't say that, but That's the fine print. So the situation's getting desperate. And now you have the sabotage of nuclear plants that I talked about yesterday. Some Russian analysts came out and said that a dirty bomb, which would be the result of the targeting of the waste storage facilities and the spent fuel rods at the Zaporizhzhia power plant, would affect 9 countries. And those countries would be Turkey, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Poland, the Baltic states, and obviously Western Ukraine. And this is the analysis based on the prevailing winds, I believe. And that would be if multiple missiles struck the storage facility that holds spent nuclear fuel. Of course, both countries deny targeting the facility, but it's looking like that. It's looking more and more by the day that a nuclear incident is going to happen. And like I've speculated before, that could be a good or bad thing, because it could be what we need to have that negotiation window to have a temporary armistice in order to get people to come to the bargaining table to try to mitigate that problem that's going to affect all of those countries. And that might put pressure from the surrounding countries on either Kiev to make concessions or the Russians to make concessions. Anyways, it could be a mixed blessing is what I'm trying to say. This is other scary news right here. European and American banks are allowing people to restart Russian bond trading to give people an out, to divest from their Russian holdings. Okay, and they're saying that this is not motivated. I'm gonna decline that phone call here. This is not motivated by an attempt to profit, rather to allow clients to wind down their exposure in accordance with sanctions rules. So this is the great decoupling. You got Chinese companies delisting from the stock market. You got this liquidation of Russian assets. You have Kiev talking about attacking Ukraine. Kiev talking about attacking Crimea, which is, effectively from their perspective, Ukraine. You got Beijing doing joint military drills with Moscow. Wall Street reviving Russian bond trading in order to allow people to divest. And it's all not looking good. So if you can stockpile anything, stockpile food. It's never going to go bad, especially if you do canned food. Well, some of it will go bad, but a lot of food. If you haven't seen my video on the truth about food expiration dates, go and watch it. Who is this person persistently calling me and interrupting this video? I'm not going to be happy when I finally talk to that person. The government is telling us to get prepared. The Canadian government, I guess they don't want the Canadian prepper, dominating this space. So they're starting to do something similar to the whole New York nuclear, how to prepare for a nuclear bomb campaign. And they're encouraging people to get an emergency kit. 72 hours. A 72-hour emergency kit is just not going to be sufficient for anything. I mean, most people have a 72-hour emergency kit, hopefully, in their fridges. You need at least, I would say, 30 days supply nowadays. And I don't know what the hell's going on here, but this person has called me 5 or 6 times in a row. Get a clue. I don't want to talk to you, okay? I'm really upset with you now. Hopefully, if you're watching this video afterwards, you're ashamed of what you've done. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think in the comments section below about all this and more. And what are you doing to prepare for the skyrocketing food prices that are only going to continue to go higher and higher and higher? Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there, folks. Canadian Prepper out.